Welcome to A Place for Film, the IU Cinema podcast. On this week's episode, we're talking about the Orphans Midwest Film Symposium. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Andy Hunsucker.
And I'm James Posca.
Jason is not here this week. We've got a new guest host to fill in for us, James Posca, formerly of the City Lights series and formerly of the Home Movie Day. And what are you doing now?
Just writing a dissertation, watching a lot of movies.
Okay.
That's about it.
All right. So with us this week to talk about the Orphans Film Symposium, Rachel Stolce and Josephine McRobbie. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So the film symposium coming up, John told Jason and I that this is like the biggest event the cinema's ever put on. So I'm really excited to hear more about it and what all went into this. But we'll get to that later. All right. Well, let's talk about the Orphans Midwest Film Symposium. So this is an event happening starting Thursday, September 26th, and it continues on Friday and Saturday. And this is an interesting event because it kind of mixes the academic side with the more public side of the cinema. So Rachel and Josephine, you're both here to talk about it. First of all, tell me what your role is in working with this event.
Our role is we're co-hosting the event with the cinema. Mm-hmm. And I worked with Dan early on. So Dan Strebel, who's the founder of Orphans, he's founded it in 1999 at South Carolina. I talked to him a couple years ago about having it here for lots of reasons. Mm-hmm. So we're sort of putting it on now.
Okay. All right. And what are your specific roles? Do you have a title with the symposium or anything like that?
Well, I think I'm co-host, but we've given Josephine a title, I think.
Yeah, I'm the local planning coordinator, so
okay.
A lot of wrangling of presenters. Yeah.
So Josephine's had a challenging job. So we have 65 presenters, and so a lot of them are bringing clips of some kind. So if you think about each and every format that might possibly come into the cinema's booth, it's kind of complicated. So Manny, the projectionist, has a fun task ahead of him.
Yeah.
And just arranging all the details of everything. Josephine's been awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So you said this was founded by a guy named Dan Strebel. Where did this start and how did it start? And just give me a general sense of what is the event.
Okay. So it's a really, really cool event that Dan formed in 1999, and it's started sort of as a highlight. So an orphan film essentially is non-theatrical, sort of non-feature that falls through the cracks. So anything like newsreels or educational films or home movies, or it could be a huge array of things, right? So things that aren't necessarily being preserved or protected by any of the studios, right? So it tends to be quirky, completely quirky stuff. At the last one, there was everything from Macbeth filmed in Ghana on video to arty ads to the Sugar Crisp commercials at Duke University, and a whole actually Skip Alzheimer's going to be here this year. He was at the last one and had digitized all the Sugar Crisp Sugar Bear cereal, and so they did a whole chronology of Sugar Bear. And then really nice high art stuff from the Irish Film Archive. And I can talk about all the stuff that we're doing here, but so it's stuff that tends to be lost or in the past maybe underappreciated or just not as the focus of anything. So it was in South Carolina, the Orphans started, and it's every other year. And then when Dan moved to NYU, where he teaches now, he took it with him. So it's been in New York. And next year it's in Amsterdam. So New York. And Los Angeles hosted a mid-Orphans also, so an Orphans West. So It's been New York and Los Angeles, Amsterdam, and now Bloomington.
Okay. So what is the so you said it happens every other year as sort of the official version. What's the reasoning behind doing sort of a mid-year version?
A couple of different reasons. One, to branch out and give people an opportunity to come to this. So not everybody can always go to New York or Amsterdam. So part of our focus has been Midwest, which is actually kind of expanded. It depends on what your version of Midwest is, because I think we go all the way to Pittsburgh, like the people coming, and of course Nashville. Trying to think how far west. We have a lot of people coming, obviously, with 65 presenters. But so part of the idea was we have this gorgeous cinema. The huge basis of our collections, which I could talk about, are all orphans almost, like probably 95% of our collections. And so it's a great place to highlight the symposium.
Yeah.
It makes sense because, I mean, the Midwest has this rich history. Indiana University being a big part of it, but also Chicago as an industrial film center, that there's something like this here in the Midwest, because so much of the production, especially, from the 20s till now, on educational, industrial filmmaking has happened in the Midwest.
Right. So, and a big part of how we formed this symposium, this particular one, not all of the panels, but a lot of them are based actually on the collections we have here. So, what James is talking about is IU was a distributor of educational films from the 20s through the actually late 80s. So pretty much all of those, and we've actually been growing the collection since the libraries took that over, and it's been at Film Archive, so we're up to around 72,000 titles in that collection. So it's pretty substantial, and those are really all pretty orphan films.
Yeah.
So there's a panel on that, and there's a panel on Bogdanovich, which is the Lilly collection. There's going to be a really nice exhibit also at the Lilly. If you've never seen my favorite, Rita Hayworth's makeup kit. Have you seen it?
I haven't, no.
So it has Orson Welles' love letters to her in it. And they're nice little picture drawings about how blue he is when he's without her. So that's going to be up at the same time.
That's
so
pretty
tying
cool.
in all the collections. We have stuff from all over.
The Black Film Center and Archive has a panel. The Kinsey Institute has a panel. We have a representative from the Media Preservation Initiative here talking about mass digitization and preservation issues. So a lot of people here are represented, and in the Midwest as well.
Very cool. So this is sort of presented as an academic conference, but it's open to anyone can sign up for it, correct?
Yeah. So you mean to attend?
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. Yeah. So some portions of the day are, all the daytime portions are panels. But they're actually really fun to go to. Like when I went to Orphans in New York, like there are random people that come to it and they're just like, this is cool stuff to watch. So, a lot of what you're doing is for 3 days watching really, really cool stuff that you'll never see anywhere.
Exactly.
So that's really fun. But we have some super special events. All 3 of the nighttime events are going to be nice. And those are separate tickets if anybody wanted to come just for the Bill Morrison film. He's a really interesting filmmaker. And this time there's a cellist coming with him, Maya Beiser. That's Thursday night, and that's going to be super fun. Do you want to? I don't have to. You can especially talk about the Saturday night because Josephine's performing.
Well, let's talk about each one of those individually, like in depth.
Josephine's performing Saturday night, so she can talk a lot about how fun that's going to be.
Okay.
Well, it's going to be great. I worked for Kelly Hicks, who is at the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum a couple of years ago. And she asked me to perform along with some other musicians, but that's a very small part of it. She's curating a whole evening of music in film and music accompanying film, and she's found some really, really amazing stuff, and we've also provided some of the material for that. We have here a couple of Hoagie Carmichael soundies that are a lot of fun. I think one of them has Dorothy Dandridge in it.
Yeah,
right?
One's Lazy Bones and one's Hong Kong Blues. So.
Yeah, those are wonderful. Another presenter, she's got about 12 people presenting this evening. Someone else is bringing a stop-motion version of Close to You by the Carpenters that was made in the early 70s by a high school student in Chicago. And what else? Chicago, which is a really famous public access show in Chicago for kids that has live bands come on. They're bringing some highlights from the show.
Oh, wow.
It's wild. It's a lot of fun. So, yeah, it's going to be really great. And then we have the group Lilas coming up from Nashville, Tennessee, and they are going to accompany an Arthur H. Smith home movie of his wife's organ recital, which is well, Andy Urich told us it was one of his top 5 pieces of cinema ever. So
Because
it's this elderly woman playing
best.
the organ, and it cuts to reaction shots from her cats. So Lila's have come up with a whole, they're going to be playing along with the soundtrack,
So you
which will
can't
be
hear
really
the woman
cool.
playing, but they've come up with a soundtrack for it.
You can hear her
Oh,
playing,
okay.
so they'll be playing along with her. So it's going to be really, really fun. Yeah.
That sounds absolutely amazing. I could have never imagined that could happen in the world. I'm just glad that that exists.
There's quirky things
Yeah.
to be happening. And Josephine also, I should say, she's a really good example of how Orphans comes about. So she took 2 films from the film archive and artistically merged them. So they're collage-y kind of films now that her band is playing over. So that's a cool thing. So she's made a new
Cool.
piece from it.
Yeah, they're 2 really great faded, super, super faded but beautiful oceanography films from the 60s and the 70s. So they look
Very
they
cool.
look nice together.
Very cool. So it sounds like there's just an insane amount of random things coming together. How do you actually find this stuff? I was talking to Richard M. Roberts about SlapstickCon, and he was telling me like he has a network of people that, he sort of makes contacts and goes out in the world, and people know what SlapstickCon is, and if they have something like this, they sort of bring it to him. How does it work for Orphans?
So I think normally Orphans is very similar. So Dan has like 1 billion people. And in fact, their people this week have been like, hey, Dan, can I bring blah, blah, blah? It's really cool, because that's how it usually gets put together. This one was a little different because we had a little committee on campus and formed it, although it sort of morphed over time. So even the stuff from like the BFIs just restored this turn of the century film from the North Pole expedition from 1903. That's going to be super cool. So that was a Dan bring in. So some of it's the restoration stuff that's happened. Sometimes it's artists. But it's the same kind of thing where Dan has this whole cajillion people, and they're like, hey, I found this thing.
A lot of collectors.
And artists. So like lots
Yeah.
of times there were these women last year that had painted. They just painted blank film stock, and it was really, really gorgeous. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So it's fine. It's wacky things that people find
Yeah.
or beautiful or.
And if you're in the libraries system here, working in the archives, you have what is literally a treasure trove of information. And so for us, a lot of it has been going through, especially films that were produced here at IU, like Hoosier Promenade, which is a square dance film we'll be showing that's taped here in the 50s. You see the Union in it, and sort of just going through and pulling things, and there's just so much out there. So for us, it's very easy,
Yeah.
I mean, for individual collectors, you're sort of going out there and finding everything yourself, but we've got an amazing resource here.
Yeah, the library's film archive actually is providing content, I think, for lots and lots of different panels, not just the panel about educational films, but I think there might be like a film in almost every panel. There's a
Wow.
lot of them.
Wow. So it sounds like this is sort of like Dan Striebel, sort of like the guy who sort of controls the event, but it also sounds like IU really planned out this event. How much of it was done sort of at IU, and how much of it was done sort of from Dan Striebel's, and how did you guys sort of go about the process of just building this program?
Well, there was a group that met initially with John Vickers and me and Greg Waller and Brian Graney, who's at the Black Film Center Archive, and Russell Schaefer and Noel Griffiths. So some CMCL grad students. And we sort of tweaked out what we sort of had in mind initially, and a lot of those people are panel presenters and put their panels together. And then we would Skype Dan in. He was here in January for one of our first meetings. But otherwise, he was ahead in our meetings. So with his sort of approval, and then he certainly has tweaked a lot in there. But like John Vickers is responsible for the Bill Morrison. Dan works a lot with Bill Morrison also, but I think John ended up getting this turning into a world premiere because he got it sponsored, which took a lot of effort, clearly.
Yeah.
And so it was. I think it was a lot more of a group, which has its pros and cons.
Sure, sure. But I'm kind of curious about did you have any like criteria for, I mean, besides sort of the general orphan criteria of films that maybe have been forgotten or lost or that sort of thing, did you have any criteria going into it? Did you just set up any ideas of like, you talked about how you wanted a lot of it to be based on IU collections. Was that sort of a theme you tried to go for, or what sorts of criteria did you have as you were sort of selecting films?
Well, right. Well, so part of the idea is in this particular version of Orphans, materiality in the moving image is so that references sort of the physical object. So in the film that Dan is bringing with Mike Michon from the Library of Congress, if you think about what you're going to see is a new print. So it's a new restored print, but this film was originally in the Library of Congress as a paper print. So it's what was submitted for copyright. So the only version it was paper. And then it got digitized, and you can see it in that format. And now it's a new print that you're going to be watching. And so sort of referencing what the physical object, right? So a lot of what we do in the archive is deal with physical objects and sort of contextualize, as opposed to like a film scholar who might just talk about content, right, and genre. But we actually are talking about more So a lot of it's been based, the whole conversation and the whole way this has been built is a lot about the physical objects, which is a whole other conversation. So like that Jane Galooly film, The Suitcase of Love and Shame, is a great example of that. And the archivist who found that, so the film is, this woman uses audio tape from the 60s. So this couple was having an affair, and they would live in different places, and they would record on reel to reel and send the tapes back and forth. And this whole thing was recorded, and this woman has turned it into a movie.
It ended up on eBay.
It ended up on eBay.
Oh, wow. And someone bought it.
And the archivist who found this stuff, he's coming too. So he's going to introduce, and then the filmmaker's coming. But so that also goes back to, right, the physical object and what that is.
Wow.
So a big portion, this is an answer to your question, the big portion of what this is based on are the archives and are the amazing holdings, but also thinking about the physicality or materiality of the objects.
Right, and maybe another good example of that is the same night on Friday. We have Landfill 16 by Jennifer Reeves, who's a film artist and experimental filmmaker. And her piece was that she was seeing how much of the 16 millimeter film was being thrown out, especially, odds and ends and trims from film. So she buried a bunch of 16 millimeter film, let it decompose slightly, and then hand painted it. And from what I've seen from it, it's incredibly gorgeous. But that's another great example of the material nature of film and a video.
Recontextualizing it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the kind of reason for a lot of artists taking up these films as well. That it's not just showing these films, re-showing them, making sure they're seen, but also doing something with them.
Right. That's what Bill Morrison's work usually is based on too, because he works with archival material. So that's a big portion of it. So it wasn't so much about criteria, but it was based on a broader theme, and it was also based on the amazing holdings that we have here, not just with film, but because of Herman Wells' sort of interest in collecting and special collections, and then the library's support of film. And that's how they got on board and are co-hosting it. So
yeah, I mean, it sounds like the cinema was a big part of why Orphans is here. Were those holdings another big reason why Orphans is here?
Yeah, equally so. Yes.
Yeah. Excellent.
Completely.
Excellent. Well, what I'd like to do now is I'd like to kind of look through here, and I don't want to, I don't need you to like pick your favorites or anything like that, or I don't want to snub anybody, but maybe we could highlight a few things from each day here just to kind of give people a sense of the broadness and really kind of get into them a little bit. And I don't know this schedule that well. I don't know what sort of the exciting things are, what the things are, what are the things that you think sort of the non-academic audience, and not just the evening stuff, but if somebody wants to get the pass and come, because I know for Slapstick-Con, we had some diehards who just wanted to come in and see everything. What are the things that those diehards, even if they're not in academia right now, might be interested in? Maybe the stuff that might link to something else that they would recognize. Let's just start with like Thursday. What's the stuff? What's the big stuff on Thursday here?
So Thursday is actually a pre-conference, and I don't actually know as much about it. It's
somewhat separate.
Okay.
It's sponsored by the charmingly named Scums, right?
So Society of Cinema and Media Studies. So the idea is the last time a CMS met, Society of Cinema and Media Studies, they had an overwhelming supply of people submitting papers in non-theatrical in sort of that venue, like a huge number. So these are all, so they pulled together a bunch of graduate students. They're all graduate students all over the country who are all presenting in that vein. So, but I haven't been in charge of that, so I don't actually know as much about it.
They sound great. They do seem like they are more academic conference papers.
Okay.
So
And maybe
that'll be
less
nice.
screenings,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Okay. Okay. So let's just jump right to Thursday evening then. The world premiere of Bill Morrison's All Vows. So what do you guys know much about this?
We don't know a ton because it's a world premiere.
Okay.
Literally. Yeah, no one has seen this.
Oh, okay.
I've not seen anything by Bill Morrison before. I know he's very highly regarded. My advisor is well known as well.
He's an interesting artist. The one film of his I really like is called Decasia, and he worked at the Library of Congress and took deteriorated nitrate film and made a film. And it's, of course, super gorgeous because nitrate's gorgeous, and then the deterioration of it really changes the image. So that's something of his I like. Plus, if you do register for the whole conference, we're having really nice parties. So the Thursday night, we're having a nice reception before that opening.
Okay.
That should be lovely.
Excellent.
And Saturday night's going to be a super nice dinner and reception out on the IU Art Museum Sculpture Terrace.
Oh, okay.
And Skip Alzheimer from AV Geeks is going to be projecting some weird science, some Skip's
Experiment films.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was calling it Skip's Silent 16 Science.
Screening.
I need another S in there.
Something.
Yeah. Interesting.
But if you do the whole conference, there's actually so I'm just throwing out all the fun highlights that are going to be there.
Do you guys know ticket information? Like, what does it cost for the whole conference versus what are the evenings?
Yes, it is $150 for the whole conference. For graduate students, it's $60. Day passes without the evening events are $30. We added those because we had some people who wanted to just come for a day. And then the evening events, Bill Morrison and my advisor is $30. Friday and Saturday, the evening events are $10. And then the midnight screening, the orgy at Lil's Place, is $3.
Okay.
A cheap $3.
Yes, we will definitely be talking. We'll come back to that one. You can't let that title go by for too long. It's like Chekhov's gun. You have to fire it at some point. But let's talk about Friday here. So maybe there's enough stuff that we can just sort of talk about almost all this stuff. But silent era films 1894 to 1925, unseen until 2013. Just the year 1894 and film, you don't see those together that often, especially in 2013. So tell me about this event.
So I actually just referenced that. So that's the Edison paper print that was at the Library of Congress. And that's also been turned into a flip book. So you can, and then the Lilly Library has that in its miniature collection. So that's really cool. But yeah, so it was a paper print that's recently been restored in this brand new form by the Library of Congress, followed up by 1903, the North Pole expedition, right? So yeah, anybody who's interested in early cinema should come to the the morning things. And Greg Wilsbacher, he's really fun. He's at the University of South Carolina, but he got 3 degrees from IU, and he loves IU, and he is bringing. Maybe it's not for that one.
Frogland for that one?
It must be Frogland, yeah. At some point, he's bringing an IU graduation, though, from like the 20s that he's really excited about because he knows everything about IU history.
Yeah.
And he's really, really enthusiastic, and he's awesome.
Very cool. So we've got a session on media migration. This seems more like a preservation sort of thing.
Well, except I know Stefan El Noble is probably going to talk about some fun digitizing stuff of the football films at Northwestern.
Oh, okay.
Oh, but we skipped over Tom Gunning,
did we?
by the way.
Oh, don't want to do that. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
our keynote speaker, he's awesome.
Yeah, he delivered a patent lecture here a few years ago.
Oh, did he?
He's at the University of Chicago, and he is interesting and smart and writes really nicely. He's a swell guy.
Yeah.
About film.
Oh,
So.
Cool. So let's talk about the educational films and university distribution. I've always been fascinated by this idea that IU used to be the the big name in producing and distributing educational film. So I'm assuming this is what this panel's all about.
Yes.
So tell me all about it.
Okay, so this is my panel, so I can talk about this panel. So we have a couple different people talking about the one person, Natasha Ritzma, she was a CMCL grad student, and she has done a really, really amazing job talking to the filmmakers who actually made some of the films on the IU campus. And then Alex Cooper, who is now living in Madison, but he just got his PhD out of NYU. He also has been doing work on the IU as a distribution center and also Madison. And so there were all these distribution centers all over the U.S., and they would ship out to schools and churches and universities and libraries and museums and anybody who wanted to watch educational films. And that's what the bulk of our collections are.
All right. Very cool. Very cool.
And it is pretty amazing. We were inspecting a film today titled Fraternity Idea. And so that was one that was produced here at IU. And so it goes through all the wonderful things about fraternity life. But at the end, they have Herman B. Wells just identified pretty much as university president.
Well, I think he's playing a role.
Yeah, he's playing a role, but it's obviously him. So it's, if you live here and you are able to see these materials, it's extra special.
Well, I imagine there's a lot of moments in those films where it's like you sort of start to recognize some of the buildings and streets, and you're like, wait, that's not quite right. That's not like that anymore. But
the tone of a lot of those films, the difference in decades is so noticeable. I know when I see these films a lot of times now, or I watch them with other people, it's like looked at as this ironically funny kind of thing. And but I really like that they're so sincere and they're
Well, they are, and and we've digitized a bunch of them. So the libraries has on a website we have at least 230 films. But they're being used now in different ways, including this past week, the School of Health did a speed dating night, and they came over and borrowed some social guidance films, including What to Do on a Date and Social Courtesy, and they showed them to this group of undergraduates. And then we also, you want to talk about Social Guidance Sundays?
Yeah, so about once a month we host an event at the Bishop where we play old social guidance classroom films, and we've had them around a theme generally. We just had a back to school one, we had a drugs and alcohol one before that, and they've been really successful, and I think part of what people like about them is they span decades, like you said, James, and they, you see the difference in attitudes about a certain topic from the 40s to the 80s, and also for people who are local, there is some local interest there. I know we had one recently that there was a scene taking place in a bar, and then we realized at the credits that it was shot at a Binford Elementary School. Like, that couldn't have been it, right? But, all these repurposed places that were used for film shoots. So, yeah, it's a fun event.
Very cool. Yeah, we had Andy Urich on a few months ago to talk about that. And, it sounds great. Okay, so let's take a look at the Friday evening stuff. So the portmanteau 35mm, 16mm, and 1/4 magnetic audio tape. 1/4 inch, I should say. I think you probably have talked about this a little bit already, but let's refresh people's memories. This one.
So that's a suitcase of love and shame, and a frontier post.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the suitcase of love and shame. You talked about the Jennifer Reeves, and I don't know anything about the Kit Hughes.
Kit Hughes is showing a couple of trailers, Point of Order and Millhouse, I think. D'Antonio.
D'Antonio films,
Yeah. And a frontier post is about the Buffalo Soldiers.
Yeah, so this is pretty amazing, actually, because they sent us a DVD of this first. So it's the early recording of what the early black soldiers and then horseback riding and stuff. And I think it's from, was it 25? Yeah. So 1925. So they have a huge newsreel collection at South Carolina where Greg is bringing this from. And I think they've recently restored that. But that's just amazing and unique and something you don't see.
Exactly. Well, that's what I'm all about. I want to see things that I literally cannot see anywhere else for any reason. So let's get to it. The orgy at Lil's place. When we talked about the we talked about the Midnight series with those guys. They talked about this a little bit, but I think you guys will probably want to chat about it as well. So tell me about this film. It's from 1963.
So actually, Nicholas Ruffin talked about Andy Milligan the other day, and he is very passionate about Andy Milligan. So he was an exploitation filmmaker in the 60s and 70s, known for the fine films Flesh Pot on 42nd Street and Butchers, is it Bloodthirsty Butchers?
Butchers.
Not sure.
And there are a couple other titles in there. We could go on and on. I have never seen Andy Milligan's work.
Yeah.
So I cannot really speak to it, but I've read a lot about him recently. And it should be interesting. Eric Schaefer is a really great scholar. He works on a whole range of, I don't know if you want to talk about Eric Schaefer, but
He works quite a bit on stag films and pornography and the ways that those films traveled in the 30s, 40s, 50s.
So I'm sure he will contextualize it all for us.
Yes. Well, that's what's nice about it. You can sort of go see something that, probably you can't see in a movie theater anymore for the most part, but we contextualize it. It's an academic university institution here.
The nice thing about this event, though, is it is a serious academic event, and there's no doubt about that. There will be people reading from papers and not looking at anyone and using words that none of us know.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But the actual materials that they're looking at, I think, open it up to a lot more than just abstract theorizing, because these are materials that were out in the world that were doing something for an educational group or a business or someone else. So I think, it is very academic, but it's a way into academia, I think, that most people can take.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that night, I think they'll also be playing some trailers from maybe Flesh Pot. And I think that'll be interesting, too, because that's a great example of orphan film is, nobody's really putting a lot of work into preserving trailers, I think.
Or this genre of film.
Yeah, and especially this genre of film.
Except for Nicholas Winding Refn,
Yes.
who actually put his own money into restoring with the BFI 2 of the Milligan films recently.
Yeah.
And bless his heart, he said then they sold like 5 copies on DVD.
Yeah.
But it isn't overlooked. I mean, that's actually a perfect example of a whole genre of film that no one is actively, except for one director.
Yeah.
And was this
cause.
print from the Kinsey? Is this a Kinsey?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we have heard that it was one of the long thought lost sexploitation films. So we got a write up on, I think, the Daily Grindhouse, and they were really excited about this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it'll be a big event.
Yeah, I helped John sort through some of those films, and we were there with David Church and Sean Smalley, and I didn't know any of these film titles. I thought the titles were amazing because I wanted to see all the movies, but they would pull up this one and be like, "Oh my God, look at this one, John! I can't believe this one is here!" And they just had those moments every half hour or so. So that was exciting. All right, so let's cover Saturday real quick here. And what are the big events on Saturday? I see some Kinsey Institute Film Archive thing here. I see one called Off the Rails Hellbound Train. What's exciting on this day?
Yeah, Off the Rails Hellbound Train will be really, really interesting. I'm probably most excited to see that because that is so. There were these 2 filmmakers who was it in the 40s? Earlier?
I thought it was a little earlier, but
earlier.
I can't remember.
James and Alois Gist, and they were very religious, and they went around showing their films about sin and damnation to Black churches, and one of them was called Hellbound Train, and I guess the elements for it were at Library of Congress for a long time. And Howard University professor S. Toriano Berry was one of the people who put that back together and reassembled it. And so they'll be showing a short version of that. And he'll be talking about that whole process. But it sounds really interesting because it's a great example of Black filmmaking that was outside of the theatrical world. So that one sounds great.
And Andy Urich is bringing really cool advertising films, or he shipped them the other day and spliced them all together that from the Chicago Film Archive that sound really fun and I'm sure are going to be really entertaining. He's on Saturday.
Yeah. So what's the Saturday evening session here? The music. I know we talked about this a little bit, but so I mean, a lot of this stuff I imagine, especially the earlier stuff, is all going to be silent. How do you feel about the sound in these films and how? I mean, this is a whole set of films with music. With these, is the music separate or is the music part of the film? I don't know where I'm going now.
Yeah, the music is separate for 2 of the films. 2 of the films are accompanied by live music. One other film will be accompanied by participants in the audience square dancing because it is an instructional square dance film.
Oh, okay.
So we're making some vests that match the ones in the film, and we'll have volunteers coming up. So if either of you are interested.
The couples have color-coded matching vests so that you know where to move.
Yeah. So that's the audience participation and the performance side.
In the cinema. That's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
We were walking through it with John yesterday or the day before and just trying to figure out how you have the 2 bands up there and then square dancing.
And the square dance.
So it's and that's maybe part of what John's talking about when he's talking about the production level of this.
Yeah.
With this many presenters.
Yeah.
And a lot of different needs.
Yeah.
So many different formats, right?
Formats and different music and
Yeah. And so that'll be at points during the evening, and the rest will just be film that has to do with music. There are some home movies someone took of a Dolly Parton concert and a Porter Wagoner concert. There are some other things that would be termed maybe more ethnographic or documentary, and then there are produced pieces. One called All Girl Melody Makers, which was, I'm not sure, it was in the 1940s, but it's a 21-piece all-female jazz band. So that's good. That's a Castle Films one, I think. So Skip's bringing it.
And then Honky Tonk Bud, is that the Dolly Parton one?
No, that's something else.
I bet she's bringing something great. Liz Coffey's at Harvard Film Archive. She's...
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all over the place, and it's exciting because I have no idea what some of these are going to be.
Well, and that's the cool thing because you really have a complete range, and like James was saying, it's scholars, but frequently it's a big giant mix of like not scholars and different people.
Yeah. Well, that's what's fascinating to me about this event. Because it's not just an academic event. I think that's what I've learned today. This is not just people reading papers who don't like to talk in front of people, but this is really about about film archives. And I read about this event when I was about to interview Richard M. Roberts about they have this sort of like event near the National Film Archive where it's about no one knows what this piece of film is from, and so just a room of film archivists and scholars watch that piece of film and all try to figure out what it is together. This isn't the exact same thing, but it's in the same ballpark, and I like that idea of seeing this thing that, very few people have seen or even care to see. I want to see everything. That's what I'm saying. I just want to see everything.
The cool thing, too, is that, these films are being presented by people who are really jazzed to be talking about these films.
Yeah.
Mostly because a lot of times these films haven't been seen by anyone in 40, 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
And so even though there's that academic bent to it, there is this fanish element to it that I think will come through. People get jazzed about these weird little things that they find in a closet that they want to share with everyone.
Yeah.
That is the best way to put it. So the orphans I went to, every single person is passionate and excited, and they have researched everything about it, and they want to share it with you, and it turns out to be really awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I think that's a great point to end unless you guys have anything else to throw in. No?
I think we're good.
All right. The Orphans Film Symposium covering this coming weekend, Thursday, September 26th through Saturday, September 28th. It sounds like it's going to be great. I'm going to carve out some time in my schedule to make sure I get there. Rachel and Josephine, thank you guys very much for joining us. Really appreciate you guys sitting down to talk with us. James, thanks for filling in.
Oh, yeah. Anytime.
Yeah. So we will get out of here. Thank you guys very much for watching and listening. My name is Andy.
I'm James.
This has been, and always will be, A Place for Film. A Place for Film is recorded at WFIU Studios in Bloomington, Indiana.